Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'll be running through my Game Week 32 team selection, including why I've got my bench boost active and all of the hot topics as we go into the Game Week 32 deadline. Okay then, let's get started by looking at my Game Week 31 performance very quickly. As a reminder, 58 points for me and a 100k green arrow, so very happy with that, although it didn't look too promising going into Monday evening with triple Newcastle still to play. I was facing another red arrow, which would have been back-to-back after a wild card, not an ideal scenario. However, things did turn around. Murphy getting the brace within 15-20 minutes was spectacular, and Livramento obviously getting the assist for the first goal and then locking in the clean sheet to get the bonus points as well meant that I got 27 points between those two players. Sadly, Isak didn't help me out at all, and most of the popular captains for Game Week 31 all blanked. In fact, I think the most expensive player in the game that actually got a return was Mateta in Game Week 31. So there were a lot of blanks for the captains. Salah, Palmer, Isak, Marmoush even as well, all blanked. So don't worry too much if you got a captaincy blank. Although, it is worth noting that a lot of the very popular picks in the last 4 or 5 weeks have been blanking fairly consistently. Salah's blanked a couple of times, Isak as well, Palmer too, have had good fixtures, but just haven't been getting the return. So if scores have been a little bit on the low side, that might be the main reason. And possibly, if you're chasing rank especially, like myself, that could signal a bit of an opportunity in the back few game weeks of the season to maybe go against the grain and go for someone a little bit less fancied in a week where perhaps there's an opportunity to do so. Now, I don't think that this week coming is going to be that opportunity, but I will have a quick word on some of the other captaincy candidates outside of the obvious Isak later on in the video. However, only 4 returners in my Game Week 31 team, all 4 of which actually have a double game week to come. So at least it stands them in good stead ahead of their double game week in 32. Munoz and Mateta both scoring. Livramento and Murphy, who I've already talked about. Everyone else blanked. So it was a fairly low scoring week. One thing I did want to quickly mention was the fact that I brought in Saliba last week for Gabriel, who's obviously out for the season. So I don't have many regrets about making that transfer, especially because I would have lost a lot of value in the price swings between then and now. So if I made that move this week, it would have been a lot tighter to bring in any other players if I needed to, and my future plans would also be put in jeopardy. So I'm glad I made the move when I did, but in doing so, it made me feel like it was a wise decision to maybe double up on the Arsenal defence and start them both against Everton. Now, given Arsenal's underlying defensive data across the season being the best in the league or very close to the best alongside Liverpool, I didn't think it was a terrible idea. They obviously didn't concede many chances against Everton, barring the penalty, which was a contentious decision, but Everton fans will obviously say it is a penalty. Arsenal fans will say the opposite. As a double Arsenal clean sheet owner, I would probably argue it wasn't a penalty, but that's just my bias creeping in. What it all meant was that despite the good data, Arsenal didn't keep the clean sheet. I got the double wipeout, and it meant that I really regretted benching Gvardiol instead of someone like a Saliba. So although I brought him in, I didn't need to start him, and I could have varied my starting 11, not had quite so much exposure in the Arsenal defence, and just started Gvardiol away at Man United. The reason I didn't was because Man City's defensive data was nowhere near, or has been nowhere near, as good as Arsenal's across the season. Gvardiol's attacking data has also taken a bit of a nosedive recently. He's been playing at centre-back quite a lot, has only taken 1 shot, I believe, in the last 6 or 7 game weeks, so that was another factor going against him. And then finally, I thought the odds of an actual clean sheet away at Man United were a little bit lower than Arsenal away at Everton. The reason being that although Man United have been inconsistent, they do often raise their game against their rivals, and they've still got players that can make a difference. Bruno Fernandes, for instance, has been in great form recently. I did fancy that game to have a couple of goals in it. It obviously didn't, and Gvardiol has come out with the clean sheet, but also the bonus points too, because it was a very dull game, and it's obvious that in a dull game like that, whoever kept the clean sheet and whoever basically racked up all of the other underlying data points that bonus points go into was going to get the bonus points. So maybe that was a mistake on my part to overlook that factor, but I still don't really regret buying in Saliba. The price swings were a massive factor, and I am glad that I've got him in my team for this week. I am just a little bit regretful that I decided to double up on the Arsenal defence away at Everton. The result was poor. I don't think the decision making was terrible, but it was a marginal call. And maybe in those instances, I should maybe diversify my 11 and have one on each rather than doubling up on the Arsenal defence and exposing myself to more risk in a 50-50 situation. The other thing I quickly wanted to round this section off with is Kluivert. Now, I did pick him on a wild card, given the quotes from Iraola basically just saying that he had a little bit of fatigue, that he should be back soon, and that he should be back in training pretty quickly. But he's now missed 2 game weeks since wildcarding. He missed game week 30 and 31, and Iraola's quotes after the game were suggesting that they're going to try and get him fit for game week 32. Now, that doesn't fill me with a ton of confidence, considering we've not seen him in any training photos. We've not seen any sort of confident quotes suggesting that he will definitely start at home to Fulham. And because I'm currently looking at bench boosting in game week 32, I need every single one of these players to be getting good minutes in that game week. And if Kluivert's a risk, I need to have a backup plan. I need to know who I could go to and who I could move to if we don't get any sort of positive confirmation from Iraola. And given the fact that they play on Monday night, I think it's very unlikely that we get the press conference before the deadline, meaning that I probably have to rely on that quote and hopefully some training ground photos. If he appears in any photos in training, in full training specifically, then I'll feel a lot more comfortable about holding on to him. But without that, I think I'm going to have a plan to move him on just to make sure that I get the full 15 out of the bench boost. So let's take a quick look back at some of my favoured options for replacing Kluivert if I needed to do so. So I spoke about some of the options earlier on this week, but we do have more information to deal with now that we've had the Champions League games, and especially that Aston Villa PSG game is in the past, and we know the starting lineup, we know which players got good minutes, and therefore we can start painting a bit of a picture as to which Aston Villa players in particular might be interesting ahead of game week 32. So these are my preferred options at the moment. They're not all Villa players, and a few players with single game weeks across 32 and 33 might not be bad either. What is worth noting is that if you're not free hitting in 34, some of the players to the bottom of this spreadsheet might be more interesting to your team personally, because of course they don't blank in game week 34, whereas the Aston Villa and the Man City assets that I'm going to talk about as well do. So you might need to think about that when bringing in those players into your lineup if you don't have that free hit yet to play in game week 34. I do, so those top 4 assets on the spreadsheet are going to be particularly interesting to me, but I don't also want to rule out the bottom 3 either. So Elanga, although he's flagged at the moment, has been in fantastic form and has got good fixtures over the next 2. So even without the double game week in 33, you would expect him to start both if fit, and they're both good fixtures to attack with. So Elanga, not a bad shout, also might have a double game week later down the line in 36 should Forest progress against City in the FA Cup semi-final, which of course is definitely possible. So Elanga might not be a bad shout. Enzo seems like a fantastic bench boostable option at just 4.7 million. The data's a lot better than I thought it would be. 0.4 XGI per 90. That's perfectly evenly split between goal threat and assist threat, by the way, 0.2 each. And at that price point, I don't think you're going to get a player better value for money at this time. Ipswich at home in 32 is the perfect bench boost fixture, let's be honest. And after that, although it's Fulham away from home, I don't hate it as a fixture in game week 33, especially if you're able to bench him, that's absolutely fine. I think the problem with Chelsea assets now is because they don't have a double game week and because their fixtures take a bit of a nosedive after game week 34, it means that I would probably want to bench them after that point in time. And looking at my structure, it's likely that whoever I bring in now as my Kluivert replacement, should I need it, will have to play in game week 33. And also, I'll probably need them at different points in different game weeks between 35 and 38. So that makes Enzo maybe slightly less of a good option for me. Although he's been consistently very good this season. He gets good minutes and there's nothing to say that I can't just use another transfer in the future. So I'm not ruling it out altogether because 4.7 is fantastic value and it can enable a lot for me. Finally, the most expensive option I can get to is Matoma. Unfortunately, I can't quite get to Rashford anymore, which I'm gutted about because I really like him as an option, but we'll go into him in just a moment's time. Mitoma and to a lesser extent Minte at Brighton against Leicester at home again seems like the perfect option for a bench boost. If you can get there easily enough, I would recommend Mitoma over Minte, mainly just because even though it's 1.5 million more expensive, the reliability of minutes is there with Mitoma, whereas it hasn't been with Minte over the season. And the last thing you want, if it's a bench boost especially, is to not know for sure that your player is guaranteed to start. With Mitoma, you should get that. I mean, no player is absolutely locked in. Even Salah gets a rest from time to time. But Mitoma is as close as you can get in that Brighton lineup. So fingers crossed he would be fine for game week 32. And then 33 if you had to play him. Brentford away. And again, like I said, I probably do need to play this player in game week 33, unless I start Murphy away at Aston Villa, which might not be a terrible idea. Starting to talk about the options with double game weeks on the horizon, Aston Villa and Man City. So Savinho is probably the only Man City option that's still on the radar that I can get to. 6.2 million, great underlying data at 0.58. But I'm just not convinced that the minutes are there. And like I said, because I'm bench boosting and because I'll definitely want to play him in game week 33, I'd want that guarantee of minutes. Otherwise, that bench boost could be one player down, or maybe I'll get 20 minutes off the bench for him. And that's just not good enough on a bench boost. I need someone that I really feel starts the game, which again is kind of previewing the Aston Villa section in a moment. But Savinho just doesn't give me that. He doesn't give me that confidence. Crystal Palace at home this week's not a bad fixture, but it's not great. And then the double does look good, but only if he gets the minutes. And if he gets 90 to 120 across the double, is that good enough to beat one of the Aston Villa players? I'm not sure it is. And that's if he even gets those minutes. He might not. He might get benched altogether in one of them, not get a minute, and then it might just be a single game week for him. He's been very good. The data's good, and he has more often than not been starting for Man City, but I just don't think I've got enough confidence there. So that probably rules Savinho out for me personally, which brings me to the Aston Villa options. Now, the three that I'm still looking at now are Rodgers, Asensio, and Marlon. Marlon, I think, is great for a 1 week punt against Southampton away from home. I don't need to talk about why that's a good fixture. They're absolutely awful defensively, and especially away from home for whoever's playing them seems to be a really good targetable fixture. Southampton at St Mary's have been very poor all season. In fact, particularly poor at home. So Aston Villa going to St Mary's is not a problem whatsoever. Marlon also isn't registered for the Champions League, so he couldn't play last night against PSG. He won't be able to play the return leg either, so could be pretty likely to start in game week 32 against Southampton. However, I do ideally not want to be transferring this player out in the future. And therefore, I just think, especially with the double game week next week and only one free transfer to play with right now, that kind of rules Marlon out, because after Southampton, which by the way, I'm not even 100% confident he starts that game, more like 80%, 90%. If he does start that game, I think game week 33, there's absolutely no guarantees he starts either of those two games against Newcastle, Man City. And then although I might get short-term benefit from it, long-term, I think my team would be in a worse place because of that transfer. So Marlon, probably not great. Rodgers is the most locked in. Even in the most congested parts of the season, Rodgers has been getting consistently very good minutes in the league. He's definitely one of Emery's most important players. And even against Southampton, I still think there's a decent chance he starts. But I'm no longer 100% confident. I think it's down to about 75% for me. He obviously played against PSG, played really well, scored the goal. A very important goal, may I add. It probably keeps them in the tie, given it's not 3-0, it's 3-1. They're probably still fighting for it when they get to Villa Park next week. So they'll definitely be playing their strongest 11 there. And because there's still an outside chance that they can progress, Emery's going to want to play his most trusted, most reliable and best players. Rodgers fits into that. So if he's ever going to get a rest, it would probably be against Southampton away from home in game week 32, considering they've got massively important and and tough games in the league to come, Newcastle and Man City, both directly competing for that 5th spot for the Champions League places next year. So they're not going to want to drop points in either of those. And then they've got the FA Cup semi-final. So if there's any opportunity to rest a player, even a player as important as Rodgers, it would probably be Southampton. I still think he's around 70 to 75% likely to start, but my confidence is a little bit tapered now, given the circumstances of the PSG game. So at 5.6 million, am I willing to take a risk? Well, if I'm not willing to take that risk on Rodgers, Asensio is probably the one that fits the bill for me now. I did think prior to the kickoff that Rashford would be the most likely player to sit out PSG and get the start against Southampton. But given that he started in Watkins' place up front, I think he might now get the rest against Southampton. Watkins will almost certainly start, you'd think. But we're talking about midfielders here, of course. And because Asensio came off the bench against PSG, didn't get great minutes, I think he might be in line to start against Southampton. And given the underlying data, given the price point, and given the fixture, I think he could be an opportunity that I would quite like to seize going into Game Week 32. He's still by no means guaranteed, and it might be a bit more of an issue down the line. He's only gotten 3 starts in the league so far, for example. So can I guarantee him starts against Newcastle and Man City in Game Week 33? Absolutely not. But do I think he gets minutes in both those games? Absolutely yes. I do think he gets minutes in both of those games, especially considering that he's been performing very well. They're both very important games. And even if he does come off the bench for one of them, I think he starts the other. So I think he starts Southampton. He might now play against PSG, considering they have to attack the fixture. But I wouldn't be surprised if Emery made very few tweaks to the system and Asensio got another 30 minutes off the bench in that game. And then I think that puts him in line to start at least one of the two in the double. Whilst I think Rodgers probably starts both in the double, I think my higher confidence on Asensio starting in Game Week 32 against Southampton on the bench boost probably leans me slightly more towards Asensio. And because he's going to be lower owned as well. Like I keep saying, I'm chasing rank a little bit. I've got to take a couple of risks. I've got to go differential at times. And considering the data is almost double that of Rodgers in terms of underlying attacking output, I think Asensio is a risk that I could be willing to take on the minutes for Game Week 32 and 33. And then by the time we get past the free hit in 34, I might have to make a judgment call on whether I think he's still locked in or reliable enough that I can hold on to him for the rest of the season. But I like him more than Marlon. I think I'm edging towards him over Rodgers right now. But of course, I will be posting before the deadline on X, on Blue Sky. So do go follow me over there, just in case I do get the nerves on Asensio and prefer the safer pick with Rodgers going into the deadline. However, with that move in mind, let's take a look at how my Game Week 32 side is currently set up and what it might look like on a bench boost with that transfer made. Right then, so taking a look at my Game Week 32 team selection as it currently stands, Cliver is on the bench against Fulham with the flag, but if it looks like a significant doubt, I might have to pull the trigger on one of those two Aston Villa boys, most likely Asensio at the moment, but it could be Rodgers if we get a little bit more confidence that he will definitely start against Southampton. In the meantime, though, I've only got one free transfer to use because I used my one free transfer last week on Gabriel to Saliba, and I'm hopeful that I don't need to use it and hopeful that I can roll it into Game Week 33. As it currently stands, I've got 6 players with the double game week, the maximum, and I'm pretty happy with the balance on all of them. So Crystal Palace, I think I've got close to the ideal 3. Munoz, Sarr and Mateta. I think the upgrade that you would probably make if you could make all the transfers now would be Eze over Sarr, but I think it's marginal and I'm happy enough with Sarr. And then triple up for Newcastle. Livramento covers off the defence nicely. Murphy's been in fantastic form and is very good value for money. And Isak up top will be the preferred captain for most. A quick word on captaincy. I did play around with the idea that because I'm chasing, I could have a look at a different captain option, like a Mateta, like a Murphy. But I do think that given the quotes that Hal made on Isak after the last game against Leicester, saying that we don't need to worry about the injury so much from this point onwards, probably says to me that he is the standout captaincy call and that he should start both games, get good minutes. And if he does, at home to Man United and Crystal Palace, considering the data, I just don't think I'm chasing enough to take a risk that big. And I think it could just leave me falling even further behind. So this is one risk that I'm not willing to take. So Isak's going to be my captain. And having a look at All of my other 9 options without the double game week was crucial as to deciding whether or not I wanted to triple captain this week or bench boost. Looking at my 9, all of the single game weekers, all of them actually have home fixtures, and none of those home fixtures are that bad either. I think the worst fixture for all of them is Brentford at home for Arsenal. Now, Brentford can absolutely score in that game, and Burmo, Wissa, even Sharda, they are all more than capable of wiping out that clean sheet. And am I worried about that? Yes, of course. But Arsenal's defensive data, as we always talk about, is absolutely fantastic. And although they don't keep a clean sheet every week, because no team can, they are probably the most likely team in the league to keep a clean sheet on average across any given game week. So can they keep a clean sheet against Brentford? Well, considering they've just kept a clean sheet at home to Real Madrid in the Champions League, I would say yes, they are capable of doing so. So I'll take a risk on that. I'm not massively confident, but there's no way that I'm not going to use them this week, given that they've got the double game week next week. I think it's just one that I'm willing to take on the chin and cross my fingers that they do manage to pull off a clean sheet against Brentford. Looking into my midfield, in my starting 11, I've got Palmer at home to Ipswich, a fantastic fixture, and we're yet to see whether or not he's being used in the Europa Conference League tonight. But if he's not, then I'll be even more bullish on that. Either way, I think he's had his rest now. Hopefully going to be a thing of the past with the injury, and I'm confident that he gets good minutes against Ipswich. Therefore, for me, he's a great option this game week. Salah as well, at home to West Ham, is a fantastic fixture. No doubts about that. And of course, he should start the game. So very confident on that one. Most people will, of course, own him anyway. And then up front, I've got Marmoush at home to Crystal Palace. Given Haaland's injury, I think it's very unlikely that Marmoush misses out at all between now and whenever Haaland comes back. And he should also be on penalties too. So I'm very happy with that. So overall, my starting 11 looks very strong. So moving over to my bench, which will, of course, determine whether or not a bench boost is a viable strategy for me this week. Starting off with the keeper, and it's a good sign because Verbruggen at home to Leicester is about as good a chance at a clean sheet as you're ever going to get. Leicester haven't scored in several game weeks in a row now. Q, obviously, the clean sheet getting wiped out by Leicester in game week 32, but you've got to play the odds on this one, and I don't think I could really ask for much of a better bench keeper. In fact, arguably, Verbruggen might even be my starting keeper over Raya in most circumstances, considering Leicester's goal record recently, but I'm happy with both keepers, so that's a great starting point. Kluivert, we've already talked about. If he is fit, then Fulham at home is fine. He's a penalty taker and has been talismanic for Bournemouth this season. So if he's fit, very, very happy to have him on my bench. If he's not, then that becomes a Villa player away at Southampton, either Asensio or Rodgers. And again, that seems like a fantastic asset to have on a bench boost if I think they start, which of course I'm going to pick the one that I think does. After that, over to the defenders that I'm currently benching. Gvardiol at home to Crystal Palace, not a bad fixture, although I'm not holding my breath on a clean sheet too much, but I think he's probably the weakest one on my bench right now, but there's still a good chance of a clean sheet. It's definitely not out of the realms of possibility to get a clean sheet at home to Palace, especially considering that Man City defensively have looked a little bit more difficult to break down as of late. So not bad there. Historically, the attacking threat has been very good, although, like I mentioned earlier, that might be on the downturn ever so slightly. So perhaps not the highest hopes for Gvardiol, but still a strong option on a bench boost. And then finally, Milenkovic at home to Everton, who haven't been creating a lot, especially against Arsenal, although tough fixture, fair enough. And Nottingham Forest defensively have been very good this season. Milenkovic from set pieces is also a very good target man, and the ball just seems to somehow be magnetized to him in and around the box right now. Every single set piece that Forest seem to get at the moment, it's dropping to Milenkovic. So I'm crossing my fingers on both Milenkovic and Gvardiol for some kind of attacking return. If either of them get one, then this is looking like a very interesting bench boost, and it could be a very successful one for me. Now, obviously, it's very situation dependent. Your team might not be set up for a bench boost this week, and it might make triple captaincy a more viable strategy for you. But my bench boost is never going to look anywhere near as good as this between now and the end of the season. So I think I'm going to take my chances this week. I'm going to sacrifice using the triple captaincy, although it is probably the ideal week to play that as well. But in my particular situation, I think bench boost is one I need to prioritize and get out of the way now. And there are other triple captaincy options that I at least don't mind. You've got Saka next week. You've potentially got game week 36 later on, which could be a double game week as well. And you've also got Saka in the final game of the season against Southampton, and the right winger against Southampton all season long has been feasting. So in my back pocket, I've got those options for a triple captain. But if you're not as well set up on a bench boost this week, then you might want to prioritize triple captaining if you still got it. As we reach the end of today's video, if you've got any questions whatsoever, do feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I'll try and get back to you before we hit the Game Week 32 deadline. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like, and importantly, hit subscribe. I'm really trying to hit 4,000 subscribers before the end of the season. It's going to be a tough ask, but I can only do it with your help. So if you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate if you could help me out there. I'll see you next week as we start preparing for Game Week 33, another double game week. And the first video will probably be coming out on Sunday evening or Monday morning as we start getting our teams set up for the all-important double.